Welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, July 23rd, 2023, and today we are going to be talking about a Wisconsin State Assembly election that just occurred a few days ago, one that might have been swept under your radar by the press, by your consumption of the ever-changing 2024 Republican primary, the 2024 presidential race, whatever it might be. This election seemed to be one of the last things that people talked about over the past couple of days when it came down to the 2024 race. But this special election was a continuation of Democratic overperformances across the United States. We have a special election tracker that I will show you in just a moment that has been tracking the 2023-2024 special elections ahead of the upcoming presidential year. Now, this headline here from the Associated Press is that the Republican Paul Melitik was winning this Wisconsin Assembly race, but it doesn't actually get into the nitty-gritty about how close this election was compared to how previously conservative it had voted in the past. This video is going to be a continuation of discussing special elections as we did prior to the 2022 midterms more heavily. We looked at the special elections in abortion referendums. We looked at special elections when it came down to ones leading into the midterm elections, but not really since then. But they still provide a very interesting perspective as we look to the presidential race and how the race might be changing in favor of the Democratic Party. Now, this Associated Press headline, again, is very generic. It just addresses the race and that it was won by the GOP, but there is an interesting part of it that they failed to mention in totality, and that this election went from being a Republican plus 22 district in 2022 to being just Republican plus 7. It was a narrowing up of a race, one tremendously advantageous towards the Democratic Party when you look at it on a national swing. It's a 15-point swing in the direction of the Democratic Party. Now, this was a no-name race. The Wisconsin State Assembly has nearly 100 seats here. Actually, I think about 100 in the State Assembly here, which is why it wasn't really nationalized. I mean, this isn't a congressional race. This isn't a Senate race. It doesn't deserve, in many people's eyes, the attention of the mainstream media. But the results absolutely do. We can see here that the change was pretty dramatic. A 15-point swing in favor of the in favor of the Democratic Party from the GOP is not something to scoff at. And I think many Republicans are seeing this maybe as a sign that the Wisconsin state in totality might be turning against them slightly. Democrats also might be seeing it as a benefit, and they should be. As I mentioned earlier on, I said we would take a look at the special election tracker that they have for 2024. And we can find that there is an overall trend in favor of the Democratic Party across these special elections, regardless of where you look. It also benefits us that they have a 2022 tracker, a 2020 tracker, and a 2018 tracker, so we can see which year this compares to the most in terms of special election overperformance and why that might matter for the 2024 election. So taking a look at our special election tracker for 2024, we can see here that on average, the swing towards the Democrats has been quite substantial, about 10 to 12 points, the median swing being a 12-point swing in favor of Democrats, and the average swing being about 10 points. It's a very good place to be for the Democratic Party, especially given that we are expecting potentially a rematch between former President Donald Trump and President incumbent Joe Biden. Now, we can see that in these special elections, they've started off, again, very early 2023, the first one being in a House district in the state of Georgia. Many of these races aren't exactly as contested as you might think, but they track the swing. They start to see, okay, where do people vote? How are they voting in future or in this election compared to past ones, and why that matters. And you can see that they have notes alongside of them. States without incumbents districts without opposing candidates aren't exactly thrown into the fray here, but it's interesting to see the way that these maps have changed in favor of the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and again, understanding why that matters. So like I said, the 2024 average swing here is Democrat plus 10, the median swing being Democrat plus 12. Looking back at the 2022 midterms, which we remember a lot as a very good race for the Democratic Party when it came down to the House elections, when it came down to the Senate elections, but still Republicans were able to win back House control. And looking at the map here, the special election tracker hadn't always been in favor of the Democratic Party. You can see that the swing in some instances was in favor of the GOP. For example, in 2021, when we had some of the elections hovering around the Afghanistan withdrawal, President Biden dipping in approval for quite significantly, you can see that leading into the elections, you saw the Republicans doing quite well. In fact, more often than you saw Democrats doing better in comparison to prior election results. That was soon balanced out, especially following the overturn of Roe v. Wade. You can see that in many of these races, it went back and forth, but still ultimately, Democrats did start to build back up that consistent trend. For a while, Republicans were dominating in terms of overperformance, Republican plus 18, plus 4, plus 38, plus 5, with few and far between, benefits for the Democratic Party, but still not to the level that they might expect. And especially leading into the election for the midterms, you saw that the Republican Party had a 10-point swing in the 34th Congressional District, a Democrat +5 partisan lean that turned into a Republican +10 district or not +10 district, but a +10 swing that allowed the Republicans to win by 5 points in this very competitive congressional district. But then, immediately following, quite literally the week after, Roe v. Wade was overturned, and you started to see a rechange in direction in favor of the Democratic Party. The first special election following, Democrat +12, then Democrat +4. Washington was interesting, but it was still relatively inconsequential. You can see here that in terms of Minnesota, Democrat +11. Then in Alaska, Democrat +18. Democrats flip a seat from red to blue. It just started to get better and better, and though there were some, instances where Republicans did have an overperformance, you ultimately found the average swing to favor Democrats by 0.4%. In 2020, I'm going to save you the time. We're not going to go through it. Democrat +4, Democrat +4. In 2018, it was Democrat +10 with a median swing of Democrat +10. So with this Wisconsin special election, that at headline value might seem that it favors the GOP because, quite frankly, it does because they maintained the seat. It is still very much an interesting point to understand that where we are currently is that Democrats did significantly better. Where we are nationally is that Democrats have been doing significantly better. And it doesn't show this change in support that Republicans were hoping to see following the 2022 midterm elections, given that Joe Biden would be at the top of the ticket. The midterm elections, I think they wrote off as not necessarily the worst news for the Republican Party, considering that they had a bunch of candidates that may have had their own pitfalls, and in individual races, Democrats were able to prevail. But they truly believe that Joe Biden is one of the worst Democrats of the entire century. In fact, they think that he is one of the least electable candidates, and they are very confident going into the next election that they will have the ability to defeat him, whether that's through Trump or Haley or DeSantis or Scott or whoever it might be. Ramaswamy now discussing, that's all in possibility in their eyes. But the numbers don't lie. They show the 2024 elections or 2023 special elections on par with how they were in 2018. Now, there's a lot that can change. This map will be, or the special election tracker will be changed and adjusted over the next year and a half, quite literally. But it does point an interesting, make an interesting point that they are on track to be where the Republicans or the Democrats were and the Republicans back in 2018 more closely than any other recent election. That's good news for the Democratic Party. This consistent overperformance shows that Roe v. Wade wasn't just a one-time issue for the midterm elections. This is consistently an issue that Democrats are prevailing on. And I don't argue this to say that abortion is the only issue that voters care about, but in terms of the economy, Democrats aren't exactly doing so well. Even if the economy might be making a recovery, as Bidenomics is arguing, or as many Democratic strategists are arguing, I'm not an economic expert. I can't tell you where that stands. What I can tell you is the public perception on it is that Joe Biden isn't doing the best job when it comes to handling the country, handling the economy, handling immigration. But on the issues that I think matter a lot to constituents as well are issues such as abortion, gay marriage, social issues that Democrats almost always triumph the GOP regardless of what it is. That's why Ron DeSantis has turned into public enemy number one from both the right wing and the left wing, because he's taking the very unpopular social stances that don't exactly provide him a level of electability that he promised to many of his donors, or promised to the American electorate when he came across as this super electable America's governor type of idea that for a period of time I think Democrats were very afraid of, that they are no longer, because they realize that these social issues are what driving voters out in a way that allows them to do better than they ever have in years prior. It's interesting to see, but it's fascinating to see that it's happening right now in current present day, even after the midterm elections, even after many states have started to make progress. There's still that, want for more from these voters, want for more levels of equality and assurance that their rights won't be taken away. And that's not just, I'm not trying to make that point personally. I'm telling you what the voters are seeing and what they're doing and how they're voting, because it is very clear here the special elections are not indicating a good upcoming election for the GOP. Now, historically speaking, special elections aren't the most accurate, but in recent time, they actually have been. You can see that in 2017, the Democratic Party won a special election in Alabama and nearly flipped many when it came down to the House races heading into 2018. Then came 2018. These special elections were also good for the Democratic Party. They benefited in almost all of them and narrowed down many, many competitive races. None more notable than the 2018 Pennsylvania 18th Congressional District special election, where Representative, or no longer, but at the time, Connor Lamb ran for Congress in the 18th Congressional District, a Trump plus 12 district, and defeated Rick Saccone, the Republican, in this race by 0.4%. It was an exceptionally close race, but it was a very good one for the Democratic Party, and it was a very early indicator that Democrats were on track to flip the House in 2018. Then also came the Ohio special election, with Troy Balderson and Danny O'Connor in this very competitive district, or at least so it seemed, because historically it had voted for the GOP by double digits. Donald Trump had done quite well here. Republicans had done well. You're talking 30-point margins in previous elections. So for it to all of a sudden narrow down and become this competitive district, the Democrats were just 2 points away from winning, really goes to show that 2018 was in fact moving in favor of the Democratic Party. And it was one and an unavoidable truth that the GOP had to confront very early on, that, hey, these special elections were indicators that we were on track to lose even further come the regular election. So that's why I think these special elections matter. Historically speaking, they weren't the perfect science, but they are indicators. They absolutely are, because these are the same voters that will turn out in the general election, especially if they're voting in the special. It's a sign of enthusiasm, too, for Democrats that they are turning out in these special elections as well. In 2018, the enthusiasm was anti-Trump. But then 2020 came, and there wasn't as much enthusiasm, I would say, against President Trump as there was heading into 2018. In fact, many people, I think, you saw swings from, very solid Democratic districts in 2018 that became very competitive in 2020, or maybe even flipped to the GOP in a way that showed these voters aren't voting exactly how they did in the midterm elections. While that would be good news for the Democratic Party, I'm not here to argue that. But I am here to argue that those who are voting out a year and a half in advance in favor of the Democratic Party, where they previously may have voted for the GOP, because I can guarantee you across all these districts, there were previously Republican voters that voted for the Democrat given the change in margins. It's not just about turnout. It's about a representative sample of the electable group, or about the turnout group, about the people who will vote in future elections, the people who do vote in current elections. And many of these districts have had consistent, held elections where Republicans were dominating. That is no longer the case, which is why the partisan lean, you see such significant shifts away from the GOP in quite a fashion. And as Democrats look ahead to 2024, they are looking to win in the same states that they did in 2020. I don't think Democrats are going for a slam dunk, but what I think they are going for is a reassured victory, a strong one that shows Joe Biden at this position of power over President Donald Trump. And they probably are going to get it, at least as it stands today. Again, this 15-point swing for the GOP isn't just a one-off situation. As the data shows, it is a consistent and standard trend across many of these special elections. A very good result for the GOP for the Democratic Party, given the circumstances following the midterm elections. They have an unpopular president, an economy that doesn't exactly seem to be flourishing in their favor, and a lot of things that start to turn the tides away from the Democratic Party. But ultimately, the GOP is failing to hammer in messaging that is working across these competitive districts, many of them in suburban regions of states where Republicans are continuously seeing losses across many of these districts. I don't doubt that these numbers will narrow up as we get closer to 2024. I mean, I don't think 2024 will be a 2018 type year. I think we're closer to being a 2020 type year. But as we look to 2020, if the average swing is hovering around D+4, D+5, by the time we come to a month before the election, we know what's ahead. At least based off the science, based off what we've seen in years past, we know what's ahead. And especially given that the popular vote in 2018 was about D+7, 8 for Democrats with a swing of +10. In 2020, the national popular vote was about D+4.5, D+3 on the congressional vote, and the average swing was about D+4. Then in 2022, the Republicans won the national popular vote by 2 to 3 points, the average swing here being less than a point for the Democratic Party. If Democrats head into the next election with an average swing of D+10, we can start to see where the equivalencies can be drawn between special election performance and national popular vote performance in 2018, 2020, and 2022 that will give us a very interesting depiction about the future of this country, about the future of these races, and how they voted ultimately altogether. So we will see what happens in the Wisconsin state assembly race. It will be, not state assembly race, in the future following this state assembly race. I'm going to be interested to see what's happening in Ohio with issue 1. I'm interested to see what's happening across the United States in many future special elections. We shouldn't expect too many competitive special elections. Many of these vacancies that occur due to resignations typically occur in safe districts, and about 90% of America is in a safe district. So generally speaking, the odds aren't in the favor of a competitive race. But what I will point out too is that Democrats did turn safe races from 2018 into winnable ones that they did in fact win, and ones that they came very, very close to being victors in, and ones that really indicated that that election year was going to be very favorable towards the Democratic Party. And it might happen yet again, as Wisconsin and many other states on average have begun to foretell this very interesting story of a very solid victory for Democrats in the next upcoming election. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2024 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.